Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 28th CASI Charter Chat. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone of some Zoom etiquette. Please keep yourself muted. And I would ask that everyone check right now to see if you are muted. And if you are not, please mute yourself. You may put questions into the chat and we will be checking that. As a matter of fact, if you look in the chat right now, there is a link to the slides for today. And we'll have a Q&A at the end of this session. The session is being recorded. However, the breakout rooms will not be recorded. So looking at our agenda, we'll do some quick introductions. Debrief the CCAP conference and give some input and feedback for next year. We want to remind you that we have a few things in the parking lot, and we'll give an update on the quarterly regional training content. We'll review questions from the field and or from the May Charter Chat. We'll discuss the budget trailer bill and provide some legislative and SBE updates and share hot topics on LCAP and fiscal planning for next year. Next slide, please. So as you may know, CASI is a collaboration among the California Department of Education, the California Charter Authorizing Professionals, and the Santa Clara County Office of Education. This slide shows you all of the members of the team from Santa Clara. Folks, can we give everyone a wave? And next slide. These are our CCAP partners. And if Dave and Tom can wave, I don't think Debbie's here today. Also, I want to mention that Allison Ball is here from the CDE. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and Dave to talk about the CCAP conference, which was excellent.
Well, thank you for saying so. We thought it was excellent too, and that was really a function of all of you who were there. Not everybody could make it, we recognize, but we were terrifically excited to see so many folks there, including some people who we hadn't plugged in with before. Some of the highlights, we had a good deal of discussion around academic data, and that's kind of overlapping with all of our renewal discussions and we'll be getting to that when we get to some of the legislative highlights, but a lot of discussions on renewals and just in general, a very strong program this year. This was only the second conference. This year we had a call for proposals, which some of you took advantage of and shared your expertise with your colleagues, for which we're very grateful. We had, I think, over 130 people, which was great. We like to get it a little more next year, and that will give us a little bit of less perspiration about trying to break even on a small conference, which is tough nowadays with the inflation for conferences. But next year, we had a lot of discussion there. And for those of you who were not there but might be considering next year, we're very interested in people's input about the geography of the location and the month of the year. And if you saw the alert that CCAP sent out yesterday, we even changed our conference evaluation form for you to choose. Actually, I wasn't at the conference, but I'm going to skip ahead past all the questions about the conference to the how do I weigh in on where I would like it to be next year and when. Because we have had feedback from people that have said, for example, June is kind of tough on the financial people with budgets and LCAPs and extra board meetings and everything. And yet, when we've done the surveys, like the conference evaluations, June is the most popular choice because for a lot of people, the school year's over, but people aren't getting out of Dodge for vacation. So and the other thing, we do the best we can. As you all know, there's a bajillion conferences in a state the size of California, and we don't like to plop ourselves the same week as CASBO or CSBA or something like that. But if you have a moment, maybe I'll try to see if I can get a link to the survey. Sorry, I didn't think of that for today's meeting, but I'll try to get that to the folks at CDE. Maybe they can share it just to weigh in on what year and kind of geographically what works for you. And Dave, was there anything you want to add?
No, I think people have been adding, I saw 2 comments in the chat at least, about making sure that we're close to an airport that's got good flights and all that. And I'll just throw the caveat, when we scheduled it in Palm Springs, there were great flights and they all went away.
Yeah.
So your points are well taken. So keep throwing additional comments in the chat that can help us about that. But any other feedback beyond the location would also be helpful. What worked, what didn't, in the few minutes that we're going to spend on conference.
Is that it for you too?
Yep.
Okay, that's great. All right, next slide, please. So I would like to take a moment for us to prep ourselves for the breakout sessions that are going to be coming up towards the end of this session. I would like to ask everyone to rename themselves. The naming convention is on this slide, and we will remind you again a little bit later. If you consider yourself to be an authorizer from Northern California, you are going to put a 1 in front of your name and then put your organization at the end of your name. So you'll see an example on the slide. And if you look at my name here as an example, you'll see what we'd like you to do. So I have 1 for Northern California. I have my name, and then I have Santa Clara County Office of Education. So we'd like you to take a moment and rename yourself right now. For those of you who need a refresher to rename yourself, you're going to click on participants down at the bottom of your screen. And then you'll get a pop-up over to the right. You'll find your name. Click on hover over your name. You'll see 3 little dots to the right. Click on that, and then go down and click on rename. So I'm going to give a few seconds for folks to do that. And then if you want to get rid of that list of participants, you're going to go back and click at the bottom of your screen on participants again. It looks like most people have done that. Still have a few. I don't want to spend too much time here because we have a lot of information to share, but there are a number of folks who have not renamed themselves. So going to ask you again to do that, and then we'll have another reminder in a little bit. Next slide, please. Okay. Also want to remind you that we have an annual authorizer survey. The link is here on the screen. Could someone drop that link into the chat also? If you haven't completed the annual survey for this year, we'd love you to do so. It helps us to know what to plan for you in the upcoming year, which is actually the last year of our grant. So we want to make it a really good year. So please take the survey and give us some feedback and some instructions on what you need. Okay, next slide, please. I also want to remind you that we get quite a few questions, and some of them we don't have immediate responses for. So we have started a parking lot, and on this slide, you can see the things that are still outstanding. We are working with the department to come up with answers for those things, and we bring the answers back to you when we have them. But these are the things that are still in our parking lot. We're still working on them, and we hopefully will get to them sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. Okay, so want to remind you that the July quarterly regional training will be on July 14th. It is virtual. It's from 9 to 11. And some of the topics that will be, it's all about material revisions, but some of the topics that will be included are: what is a material revision, or what constitutes a material revision? What's the process for a material revision? What is the timeline? Are there appeals? How should material revisions be found in renewal petitions? How should they be treated, rather, if they're found in a renewal petition? And then we'll go through some questions and scenarios. So if you haven't registered for the July quarterly regional training, Allison just dropped into the chat a link where you can do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Okay, and this,
No, go ahead.
Thanks. We're about to say the same thing, which is we're going to kind of address some of the questions that have come up in previous charter chats and point you to some resources where you can find some answers. And the first one had to do with SB 1439, which was signed into law last time and became effective January 1st. And that amends the Conflict of Interest Act, which previously kind of applied to appointed boards and appointed bodies like JPAs and that kind of thing, but it extended to local elected officials, including district and county board members. And there's some provisions that your boards are going to need to be aware of there. And generally, the charter school connection is there may be in your jurisdiction politically active people on either side of the charter school debate that may bring this into question. For example, if there's a petition coming your way, because of what the act really focuses on a threshold level of political campaign contribution of $250 or more, and then focuses on how that intersects with a decision for a permit or some kind of contract that's before the local decision-making body within a 12-month period. I'm not going to go into all the details because there are details and I don't want to get tripped up in any of the minutia, but in the resources, you have a good summary that we found that one of the law firms had put out. And the admonition there, as with everything we do, is when you get into this stuff, make sure your local legal counsel is kind of keeping in touch with your folks about it. In broad strokes, there's a prohibition on contributions of 250 or more that involves, if there's going to be a permit, a license, or other entitlement before the body. Accepting, soliciting, or directing campaign contributions. And one thing to be aware of is it's not just like the petitioner as an entity. It could be people who are strongly supportive of that, who are also contributing, and that's not uncommon. If you're in a jurisdiction that has hot charter politics, that might be at play. So you want to make sure that your folks are aware of those details. And basically, there's disclosure requirements, and then that means recusal. Or in some cases, you can cure I did get $500 for these people, but I'm gonna, if within a certain time period, you might be able to return the contribution. Again, I'm just putting these things on your radar without wanting to get tripped up in the details, but to let you know that there's a lot of nuances to it. Take a look at, but just make sure this has not applied to local district boards and county boards hitherto. It's Government Code Section 84308 is the statutory area where the provisions of the bill now find their home. This actually, there's a lawsuit over it because there's some groups, like some business groups, that say this is like people are going to get tripped up accidentally because it's just a low level contribution, blah blah blah. Never mind that. For now, it's the law, and so. People have got to be attentive to it. And we have, again, a summary with some links in the resources page. So just make sure that's on your board's radar. The second question had to do with LCAP addenda for schools that are getting Title I funding. And there is, the federal addendum to LCAP, which is intended to serve as a vehicle so that you can take care of the requirements to get ESSA funding. There's the SIPSA requirement for that, and this is intended to sort of be an addendum to the work that the LEA is already doing in their LCAP so that it can take care of those requirements as well. So yes, look at the federal addendum that's in the LCAP plan for receiving the Title I funding. And the third question is any information on the verified data updates, which we talked about last time. The board has expanded the list of approved verified data sources. And there is now those FAQs that the department has on its website have now been updated to reflect the May State Board meeting. And that link is also in your resources page.
Thank you, Tom. Michelle.
Next slide, please. So here is the most recent information on the budget trailer bill. Contained in the budget trailer bill is the 1-year extension on charter terms. It also has a 1-year extension on the non-classroom based moratorium. It also includes information regarding abuse of discretion. It basically defines the standard as the most differential standard of review in favor of districts and COEs, and restricts appeals to the SBE only if both the district and the COE abuse their discretion. Also mandates a study of non-classroom based charter school funding by legislative and by the LAO and FCMAT to study the process to include recommendations for enhancing oversight and reducing waste on fraud and abuse. And it also includes that all LEAs need to now hold a mid-year report regarding their actions, metrics, and current expenditures. And all of that information, and including all of the new language, is on the resource page, and it passed both houses and was sent to the governor for signature yesterday. So this is literally moment by moment. We'll keep you informed with regards to the budget trailer bill. Also, at the end of the legislative update information, we're going to have an opportunity to provide feedback and comment from everyone. So hang on for a few minutes.
And you might as well continue on.
So there.
Next slide.
Next slide. So we have removed all of the non-active bills because we've been following so many. So right at this moment, we're just focusing on the ones that we have. So AB 1054 is currently over in the Senate Education Committee. It has been amended to include some updated statistical information for 2023. AB 1555 has passed the Senate Education Committee, passed the Senate Appropriations, and is currently on consent for yesterday. So I'm assuming it is now passed the Senate and will be headed to the governor for signature, unless there's some adjustment that need to go back to the assembly. Next slide, please. So Senate Bill 10 has passed the Senate to the assembly, and it's currently in committees of education and health. And SB 739, which was the 1-year extension, it's passed to the assembly, but I'm guessing it's not going to do anything since the language has now been added to the budget trailer bill. So next slide. And I want to thank Araceli and the Orange County Department of Education for this idea. So we're going to allow everyone to unmute, share out anything you've heard, your concerns, your thoughts, things about legislative update. So what are you thinking?
More importantly, what have you heard that we haven't shared?
For the opioid and overdose training, I mean, again, right, so we're always a little bit concerned about any sort of unfunded mandates. Is there money for this?
Unknown.
Sounds
But
like
I will note it on my note to ask.
sounds like the learning recovery block grant is being cut by 21%, and the arts grant is going to be cut by 5.5%. Based on recent numbers I saw. Does that sound accurate as well? And it seems like the equity multiplier is still going to go through.
So you said there's a cut to arts, and what else?
A learning recovery block grant looks like is going to get cut by 21%, arts grant by 5.5%. And it seems like there's still, sounds like the governor wants to pass the equity multiplier. It seems like the legislative body has its reservations on that based on what I've kind of seen.
Yeah, I do think we need to wait for final numbers, because I do think certain numbers can change. I think a lot of the other language is pretty set.
Right. I also have some concerns on just the LCAP process. Providing another mid-year update is a lot of, in my opinion, red tape for some of these schools and administrators. But it seems to keep getting pushed. So just kind of more things to kind of add to the body of work for administrators to kind of stay on top of.
It also, I mean, some of the feedback I've received around just the LCAP period, so I know this adding doing another one isn't going to be popular among our charter schools, is that, it is a lot of work and the amount of time that it takes, but also this isn't their LCAPs aren't approved by the county office. So there really is almost, I don't know, I guess the question always just becomes like, why? How is this just more work? Who's really looking at the LCAPs, and does it matter if there's no approval process and there seems to be no repercussions financially to a school, regardless of whether it's done right, not right, missing areas, not missing areas,
I suspect that for charter schools, it's a way of them checking in on their progress mid-year, so that they have an opportunity to make some adjustments.
Yeah. Araceli, the only point I would make is people should worry about what they what they ask for or comment they don't have to do. But I do think the comment about timing is actually that would just have appeared in the chat is an interesting one, or a good one, because LCAP is about is tied to budget. So aligning it with an existing budget deadline might actually make it easier to harmonize the two.
One question I have is, what is this mid-year evaluation or check-in going to look like? What are we actually going to be required to do? Is it another report? Is it just that the LCAP needs to be on a board agenda for discussion? Because otherwise it's just adding another plan to this plan that was supposed to take away all of these categorical funds and is now just created additional categorical funds and now additional plans and additional reporting. And I mean, schools are intimately aware of their LCAP. There is no question. And I would argue that in some cases, charters are more aware because it's a single school plan. It's not a district-wide LCAP that you could maybe get things lost in. It's specific to one location. So it just seems like it's wasteful, and it's not something that's going to actually positively impact our students. And that's really frustrating that we're going to spend more administrative time on that with no change in the outcome for our families.
So according to the law, it says that report shall include both of the following. One, all available mid-year outcome data related to metrics identified in the current year's local control and accountability plan, which is essentially what had happened from that mid-year update when we got the COVID money. It's that same process. And then number two is all available mid-year expenditures and implementation data on the actions identified in the current year's local plan. So it seems like it's simply revisiting that mid-year review like they did with the COVID money to make sure that everything's on track. So, all right. Bree.
Hi, so our interpretation of it has been that most people use a prior year when populating their metrics. So like I'm currently doing LCAP reviews at the county office level. And for most of the metrics they're using right now, they're using 21-22 data because they don't have 22-23 data. And so what we're hoping is during this mid-year is that they will have the 22-23 data that normally we would have to wait all the way until the end into the next budget year to see. And so that was just our interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that. That's a really good point of view. Next slide, please. So moving on to the State Board of Education updates. On June 13th, there was the ACCS meeting, and they had considerations of non-classroom funding determinations, and there was an appeal of the denial of a new charter. ACCS voted to recommend that the state board hear the appeal. The next board meeting for the state board will be held on June 12th and 13th, and they'll be hearing all of the things from ACCS. Next slide, please.
Okay, so another reminder to rename yourself. It looks like everyone has done that. And thank you, Jeff, for the note. And the only person that I did see who wasn't renamed, I think, has done that. So I believe we can move on to the next slide. Hot topics. All right, so we're going to move on to hot topics. We'll start with program oversight hot topics from Matt.
Thanks. So the rest of the education community might be excited about summer vacation. This is actually a pretty hectic time for us in administration. Now is time to do all the updates, the calendar, the website, document reviews, LCAP reviews, etc. Speaking of LCAP reviews, a question regarding how to review LCAPs came up during the CCAP conference. So how are agencies and authorizers reviewing LCAPs? Here at SCCOE, we utilize the LCAP review tool from the California County Superintendents Group, the group formerly known as CCESA or CCESSA. We check to make sure that the LCAP follows the CDE template and that all the parts are completed per the template. This includes making sure the instructions pages are still incorporated into the LCAP, as that is part of the template. Then we review the plan to make sure that all the 8 state priorities are met, that there are metrics for each of those priorities. We review the financial plan of the LCAP and make sure that it matches the adopted budget and that there are sufficient funds to accomplish the goals of the LCAP. A copy of the 2023-24 review tool is included in the resource page. While authorizers are not required to approve charter schools LCAPs, it is best practice to review the document. Next slide.
Okay, we'll move on to fiscal oversight. Cynthia.
Thank you, Mifula. And one more slide, please. So just to build on the program oversight hot topics, currently in the fiscal oversight, we're also planning and preparing for the LCAPs review. One research that we found helpful is an infographic crosswalk that was prepared by California County Superintendents for their annual LCAP training. The crosswalk describes the flow of financial information between the budget overview for parents, the LCAP action tables, the adopted budget alternative form template or SACS form 1, and the FCMAT LCFF calculator. A copy of the 23-24 LCAP crosswalk is included on the resource page. And last but certainly not least, we're also preparing for the upcoming year's fiscal oversight responsibilities, which includes the collection of various financial documents by July 1st. Please refer to the 23-24 SCCOE Charter Schools Department calendar for reference, as far as a sample of financial documents that we collect as part of our own financial oversight responsibilities. Next slide.
And I think we can skip this slide. So next slide. All right. So we're going to move into breakout rooms now, where you can use this as an opportunity to follow up on something that we've discussed earlier in the session, or ask questions, or share information, or get some input from colleagues. Be sure, however, that when you go into your breakout room, you are in the right place. And facilitators, you can help by help get people into the right place by starting with introductions. And if anyone is misassigned, just send a chat to the CDE host, Allison, and she can help get the person to the right place. So our facilitators for this morning are Dave Patterson from CCAP in room number 1 for Northern Authorizers. We have Madison Thomas from Oakland Unified in room 2 with Central Authorizers. We have Nisha Pattison from Acton Agua Dulce Unified School District in room 3 with Southern Authorizers, and Tom Hutton from CCAP in room 4 with non-authorizer partners. So if you are not an actual authorizer, then you will be in room 4 with Tom Hutton. Allison, I don't know if you need to put the Jamboard in the link for the Jamboard in for the facilitators to grab. There were some people like Nisha and Madison who were not present when you initially dropped it in.
It's there.
Okay, and then I think we're ready for our breakout rooms.
Opening now.
Thank you. And Amy, are we all back?
It looks like it.
Okay, great. So let's do some debriefs of the breakout rooms, and let's start with room 1. Dave. Dave Patterson. Okay, let's move on to room 2, which was Madison.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Yeah, we had a really lovely discussion about a variety of topics in our room. We started, of course, talking about the renewal pause. I think everyone was grateful that we are still waiting, but hopefully not waiting for that much longer on official news. So talking through when do we start communicating with charter schools? When do we start communicating with boards? How do we kind of plan for all of this? So that was where we started. We talked about the new LCAP legislation, specifically talking about, how do we handle it as authorizers if the charter schools aren't fulfilling that requirement well. So we talked a little bit about including those reviews and annual reports as a specific way to kind of, oversee that. We then talked a little bit about new petitions, and if anyone has been seeing any new petitions lately, widely no. But we did chat through how we foresee a lot more material revisions coming forward with the renewal pause, and then kind of ended our discussion around programs like Edgenuity when there are virtual teachers given the teacher shortage, and whether that should be considered a material revision or how we should handle that as authorizers. So that was kind of our big discussion.
Thank you, Madison.
Yep.
Room 3, Nisha.
Hello, everyone. What we talked about was mainly LCAP authorizer review of LCAPs. When they are actually done, when they're reviewed. Some do them over the summer. One of the burning questions was how to weigh the feedback against non-compliance. What about the templates that are used and available, and how we review content versus compliance. Also, as a highlight of schools that have other issues, and that when we're talking about compliance, typically what we're going to see is that if there's an issue with any other compliance issues or non-renewal type topics with a charter, that we would just simply be adding any non-compliance with LCAP areas as evidence onto the review. Also, the fact that there are fiscal issues that can come up, and not just fiscal issues with the LCAP, but also with resources through the authorizer, of how we use our resources to review the LCAP when we actually do not approve them. Also, that it's a living document, and as authorizers, we are assessing the LCAP and incorporating their goals and looking at it during our oversight visits and reviewing LCAPs essentially to give insight into the goals that the schools have set for themselves.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna try Dave again. Dave.
Yeah, this time we're not on mute. What can I say? Okay, so a number of people already talked about some of the stuff. I'll be quick. One thing was different. We did have a discussion a little bit about the preliminary ruling about on the Napa case and the state board. and what information people are going to share. That led to a quick conversation about the trailer bill language on the abuse of discretion, and about how, if that language actually ends up in law, it'll clear that deck in terms of a greater understanding there. There was a quick discussion about the fact that the trailer bill language talks about a review on the funding determination piece, and the time frame for that review is very, very quick. We did spend a good time on the impact of renewals, the extra year. We talked about site visits. We talked about allowing to do additional site visits, start doing annual reports if you weren't, and determining instead of that, but also someone turning to what type of additional assistance that would look like for differentiated assistance would look like for charter schools. We spent a little time on verified data, and there was a clear interest in some resources to help authorizers better understand how to use it, including potentially some Zoom and things like cheat sheets and training that would be helpful. And then we also talked a little bit about attending school board meetings, and there's some questions from our newbies about, oh, do you really do this, and how to do that well?
Great, thank you. Tom, room 4. Tom Hutton.
Sorry, I'm having I think it mutes you when you return. So I had the same problem Dave did. We were pleased. We had a large group of non-authorizers this month, including some new faces. So we're very pleased with that. Just some highlights of our conversation on the sort of on the legislative update. Cynthia shared a little bit of frustration that, moratorium keeps coming up sort of in her view as kind of as a bargaining chip for things like renewing extensions for everybody. And how is it that 5 years after the moratorium, we're only now getting to studying the funding thing that supposedly prompted the concern over it? And in the meantime, they've got families reaching out to her school that would like options in their communities where there aren't any. So that was, again, why it's valuable to have our non-authorizer partners join us for these things to hear perspectives. On the LCAP funding, we had some in the weeds discussion about, the tracking of expenditures and different tools for that, and how easily forms are revised, noting that like the federal addendum is not on the same sort of update schedule, and it's pretty hard to do with the way that the document system is set up, and what are some options that people are using. And then just we also had a discussion where a material revision scenario came up, and I was being too long-winded when we came back to the group, but kind of the question of like, if we're adding a CTE program, what are the things we need to know about? Is that a material revision? And channel my inner Michelle Johnson here and say it's probably it depends. If it's a fundamental part of your program, maybe it is. If it's just one more curricular option that doesn't, maybe not. But that's a good pitch for our training next month, which will be virtual on material visions, where we'll have some legal counsel in trying to walk us through the ins and outs of material visions.
Great. Thank you. So we are right at 11 o'clock. I do want to run through our last few slides though. So next slide. We would love to have some feedback on this meeting. What do we do well? What can we do better? Next slide, please. We don't have time for Q&A, but if you have questions, drop them in the chat, please. And then these are the upcoming CASI events. So on July 14th, we've got the July quarterly regional training. July 26th will be our monthly charter chat, and August 30th is our monthly charter chat. And last slide shows how you can contact us and send us questions. Have a good day, everyone.